Between the books and movies based on his life and the courtroom drama that played out all this summer, it feels like we know James Whitey Bulger, but the truth is most of us have never even laid eyes on him, let alone talked to the mobster. But one local woman looking for answers about her father's death couldn't help but wonder if Bulger was involved, so she asked him herself. Owen Flynn was a husband and father when he disappeared in December 1972. His decomposed body later washed ashore on Carson Beach. Police never established a cause of death, but suspicions that Flynn may have run afoul of the mob led his family to think he was murdered. That nagging uncertainty led Flynn's daughter Ann to write Whitey Bulger earlier this fall, asking if he was involved, and Bulger responded. In a handwritten letter from jail, Bulger said he had nothing to do with Flynn's death, but in a surprise twist, said he would try to help her. Bulger is serving 2 life sentences in connection with 11 murders, but law enforcement has never linked him to Owen Flynn's death. Still, his daughter Ann is not convinced. She joins me now and has the jailhouse letter she received from Bulger. That is quite the letter. We were remarking, first of all, he signed it. We have his signature there. He signs it, James Bulger. And then, sincerely, and we were struck by how beautiful and neat his handwriting is. His penmanship is like, that's what you learn in the 3rd grade, and he never forgot it.
Exactly. He states in the letter, too, it's from his Catholic upbringing.
Yeah, probably.
But when I got it in the mail, it was only a few days for the turnaround time from when I wrote to him till I got the response. And
So you wrote him right after the trial concluded?
Correct, after the verdict came in, because it was a situation during the court when I was sitting in the front row, and he was brought in, and he actually stared at me, and I had a picture of my father on my jacket that day. And I had a major emotional reaction. It's the first time I've been able to look somebody in the eye with some form of connection to what I feel, is my father's death and responsibility for it. And when he got up to leave, he stopped and turned and stared again. When I got out into the hallway, that's when the press came after me and asked me if I was related or if I knew him. Why did I have that reaction? So I had told them my story. And I used that stare because I didn't realize his behavior in court prior to when I was there. And wrote to him with it by starting out the letter saying, I am the woman that you stared at, not just once but twice.
Yeah, and he responded to that in the letter. So let's put up a few of the quotes, how he responded to you, because you asked him directly if he had anything to do with murdering your father. So he says, in one of the things he says, naturally, if I knew anything, I would never give you any names, but I'd tell you everything if it would help you. So do you believe him when he says he is?
I'm going to say through all the history that I know about him and what I've gone through investigations, he's always going to try to be the good, bad guy. That's his role, and he doesn't want to be known as a rat. Those are his 2 bottom lines.
Oh, he said it right there. He wasn't going to give you any names.
Correct.
If he knew anything.
Yeah, and he's just validating who he thinks he is. But he goes on to give me 3 scenarios in the letter of what he feels happened to my father.
All right, so also in the letter, he explained to you why he was staring at you, and he says, he was talking about Catherine Gregg. He said, you thought it was you. He said, it's been 2 years since we were together meeting Catherine Gregg and have not been able to write the worst punishment they have subjected me to so far. So he's again making it all about him.
That's correct. So when I had that reaction, obviously I thought it was him reacting to the picture of my father and maybe me getting some kind of closure to all of this and some answers.
But he thought you looked like Catherine Gregg?
Well, that's one of the things.
I don't see the similarity myself.
Exactly.
But...
And with the long hair, obviously it's not. I had a friend, very good friend, attend with me, and she has similarities. And I realized when he wrote back to me, it wasn't me he was talking about. He stole that moment from me, too, and made it about him. He was looking at who he thought was Catherine Gregg in the courtroom or a relative of.
All right, he has one more. It's a fairly long letter, but here's one other quote. He said, I have been in this isolation cell for 2 years and 2 months so far, and it's always cold, freezing in the winter. It's my hope, if there is a hell, they have a nice warm cell down there reserved for me. So he's got some gallows humor in there, too.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that he says in there, and I can tell you one of the quotes in a minute, but getting to that, he refers to the poem of Fire and Ice and how it's always so cold in his cell, and he's freezing in the wintertime there. and the physical part of his existence. He's, crying about it, basically. And I wrote back to him, and I cut out that poem that he referred to, The Fire and Ice. And I wrote to him, your fire and ice might be physical, but mine's emotional, and I signed it. And I hope that he hangs that in his cell and he has to look at it every single day.
Do you think you'll hear back from him?
Not anymore, I don't. I think he's done with me. I've written to him 2 more times since, and there's been no response at all.
So, Ann, what do you think happened? What is your best guess? Your father disappeared December 8th, 1972. You were 7 years old, and you have a harrowing story. You actually saw his car.
Right, I was the finder of the car that my father did not come home December 7th. We got up to go to school the next morning, and I realized that something was wrong in the house. My mother was not acting right at all, and the phone kept ringing. And then I realized that through the phone calls that she was saying that my father didn't come home. And I played sick and stayed home. But we got split up at the end of that day to go to different relatives' house to be taken care of while we tried to figure out what was going on with our lives. And during the travels, we got off at the Granite Ave, going to a relative's house in that direction, and the car was parked on the Granite Ave bridge with the wallet on the front seat and the keys on the dashboard, and the car was locked.
What makes you think it wasn't just a suicide?
Well, I've been to many, many law enforcements. I've been right from cold case detectives right up through the FBI, all of them, Secret Service. And there is a particular MO that the Southie people, the Southie gang, if you will, has used, and that's the same MO of leaving my father's car.
And what makes you think Bulger, as opposed to someone else, had something to do with it?
I'm not saying he is responsible for this, but I do believe that his gang is. And what I've found out through my own investigations is sometimes they don't even know the names. I know there are plenty of other families in the same situation as mine, and when these guys would come back to the garage and talk about, well, I think, so-and-so might have seen something, I think so-and-so might be a problem, they would never mention names, and Bulger would just turn around and say, that problem needs to be taken care of, so go take care of it.
Do you have that one more quote there that you're remembering of it?
Yeah, it's just a little bit of his humor here, and he said how he went on that the trial, they would have you think that it was all action at the garage all the time, but it was attempted. I'm sorry.
So he said it was business as usually boring.
Yes.
An occasional murder.
Right. They were buying off cops, doing the betting, and then an occasional murder. And then he says, smile, Ann, that's my attempt at gallows humor, which I felt was very sick and twisted. I've never met the man in my life, and especially talking about my own father's death.
But he denies having any knowledge of it whatsoever.
Correct.
Why do you think he wrote you back?
I think he wrote me back to get his name out of the way because he wants to be the good bad guy. Again, he doesn't want to take on the responsibility.
All right. And Owen Dickerson, thank you so much for coming. Great story.
Thank you.